wanted to start out with this business intelligence example. So from an ag tech perspective, the USDA has a lot of accessible data. And I mean, there's a lot of it. So, sometimes you may run across a data set like today, I'm going to use this train speeds data set. And, maybe I don't know a lot about this data set, but I'm trying to do some research on, how fast grain is getting from point A to point B. And so I want to be able to do some analytics around that, or even inputs or, things like that. So I'm just going to export this data set in a CSV file. And what I'm going to do is use ChatGPT to be able to help us look at some analytics around that. So let me pull up my window here. Okay, so just taking my downloads there and just popping it in. I'm just going to pop it into this window, and you can see, again, this is with the free account, that when I pop it in here, it uploads the CSV file that came from USDA. And so I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna make you watch me type today because it's pretty painful. So for people to watch, so I've like kind of typed in some questions I knew I was gonna ask, but the one thing you can do is just, what can you tell me about this data set, right? And you probably don't even have to type that in for ChatGPT or a generative AI tool to do it. And it's going to, come back to you with kind of like, it's going to tell you it's analyzing, and then it's going to create some context kind of around this kind of data set. But it's kind of like a first step into, like I said, like if you're not knowing anything about the data set, it's going to provide you some basic context. So it's going to tell you things like, well, how many records are in the data set, right? What are the columns? Like, what are the columns names? Like, it's telling you like the scans, like how many years. So it's telling you how many years of data are in here. Oh, we've got data by railroad, by commodity, by miles per hour. These bonus things that it prints out here are kind of like a box of chocolates. You never know exactly what you're going to get, but it usually does provide some additional context that maybe you didn't ask for. And it will even suggest, would you like to see an analysis of trends over time, some comparisons between railroads? So it even gives you some ideas of things that you could look at for this data set. So one of the things that, like, I can't help myself because I'm an analyst, but are there any irregularities or missing data that I should be aware of, right? So can it go through the data set and basically say, okay, well, actually, it's got about 6.8% columns that are missing data. There's no duplicate rows, but it's telling me that there are some outliers, like some 40 miles per hour, which seems, high values at the upper extreme of the data set. So it's telling me just some things to be aware of. But I can get into this and actually get some richer analytics to start with. So, what can you tell me about relative speeds by operator? And we'll even say for grain. And, it's basically going to do some analysis of the data. And typically what it's going to use is it's going to use something like Python code in the back end of this to do that. And it will actually give you the code if you ask for it, right? Like, but it's telling me here, okay, so I've got all the different railroad lines. What's the average speed? And this is specifically for grain shipments. What's the max and the min? And then it's actually giving me some key observations, kind of some bullet points on things like, oh, well, Kansas City Southern is fastest on average. So it's kind of like starting to already give you a feel for what the data is telling you. And it actually said, would you like a visualization, which is kind of the next question I was going to ask it. And I would say, yes, what type of visualizations would you suggest to look at? I'm gonna just call it performance by operator. And typically what you could expect here is it's going to tell you, like, here's some basic types of analysis. You could do a line chart, you could do a bar chart, you could do a box plot, a violin plot. I actually think, I just want to say, yeah, show me I've used this plot a lot, and really I've kind of learned about it through, some of the analytics I've done at previous companies. But I think like that's one of the beautiful things about this is it can also expose you to other types of business intelligence that you may not have seen before. And let me see if I can make this bigger. I don't, I can probably just zoom in. Whoa. Okay, but kind of like what a violin plot is it's showing you here, okay, here are the different railroads. And from the data, what it's doing is it's basically taking like, it's almost like a distribution curve here. So how many of these values for BNSF were around, let's say this is like 22 miles per hour versus 25, and it's creating this distribution plot. So you can kind of visualize, right? Like some different things. Like if I look at UP, I mean, obviously if I look at Norfolk Southern versus UP, I can tell that there's obviously a difference, right, in the mean or the median. But the other thing is I can tell like from some of these plots, like um, boy, there's a much wider spread, right, for data around Norfolk Southern than the UP. And typically there are very practical reasons around these things, like the way that the railroads are transiting or speeds on the particular rail lines or whatever, right? But in terms of this, these types of this type of business intelligence can kind of give you, some interesting characterizations of data, and again, just kind of show you some different visualizations that maybe you haven't used before.